You can maintain records of employee certifications in Safety Inspection Manager. So at your fingertip, you know who's competent to operate, whatever the task is, who's been trained, whose certification needs to be refreshed, and when do I need to have that scheduled by. You can do observations of employees to know that they're performing the work that per the procedures that you want them to follow.
Right, you have a checklist application that's just for incident reporting. You have an LMS application that's just for training and development. You have another application that can help you with understanding compliance and regulations or hazard management. But it seems to me that from a software standpoint, they're great niche solutions. They're almost like Band-Aids. But when you think about the whole worker, right, that entire worker, it seems like the opportunity for a software that centralizes, streamlines safety protocols, really making this kind of the core safety system upon which other, these four pillars: hazard management, compliance and regulations, training and development, incident reporting analysis, and just checklists rely upon. You really need something that automates that data collection, that simplifies that compliance training, that offers these safety managers a way to be able to assess the risks and measures of what's going on at multiple locations through one centralized hub. It seems to me like, an application like Safety Inspection Manager really is that full solution. And there needs to be, if I'm honest, there needs to be more kind of these centralized I don't want to call them one-stop shops, but the centralized platform that a safety manager can use to manage not just one thing, right, but the whole worker, right, as a whole. I mean, that's, to me, it seems like that should be the foundation. And maybe it's cost, right? Maybe it's subject matter expertise or lack thereof that's, I guess, preventing these adoption or these softwares from being built and created. But I guess the question I would have for you is, talk to me a little bit about that, and talk to me about, I guess Oppmann and, the platform that Oppmann's built, and, maybe this safety management software, inspection software that, I guess, kind of solves that kind of centralized, streamlined whole worker, I guess, protecting that soul of the worker, not just an arm or a leg. I guess walk me through that platform and how, Oppmann itself is trying to change kind of these fundamental flaws.
Yeah. So I think when I think around kind of the platform and technology enablement, right? And we think about starting with the beginning of our discussion, where you really start with a hazards assessment, right? And how do you actually, once you assess the hazards, how do you mitigate the risk associated with those hazards so that you can avoid outcomes? And what are the types of hazards that exist? Struck by, struck against, caught between, right? Slips, trips, falls, equipment performing or not performing, right? Those can all be hazards. So there's technology that can actually easily be deployed around, alerting when, proximity detection between from equipment to equipment and equipment to pedestrians. So now technology is ready, enabled, ready to go into the industrial, or I should say any warehouse, and be able to help alert whenever encroachment is occurring. And it's not just about line of sight anymore, and everybody, quote, looking around, head on a swivel when you're walking through a warehouse, observing all the moving parts. Now you can enable technology to be that additional sensor that gives you alerts real time. So that's one. Two is be able to kind of manage the equipment and the physical conditions of a facility through a wide range of checklists that can be performed, maybe are being performed, but you can streamline that and simplify that whole process tremendously with an application like Safety Inspection Manager. The three modules that are kind of embedded, or the core competency of the Safety Inspection Manager, is asset inspections, and which includes all of kind of the fire extinguishers, the ladders, the below the hook lifting devices, the PPE that may be required to be worn in that area, the fork trucks, the EOTs. You can perform asset inspections. You can maintain records of employee certifications in safety inspection manager. So at your fingertip, you know who's competent to operate, whatever the task is, who's been trained, whose certification needs to be refreshed, and when do I need to have that scheduled by. You can do observations of employees to know that they're performing the work that per the procedures that you want them to follow. And then you can do area inspections. So you can do that kind of that very at your fingertips, the area inspections to make sure the physical conditions don't contribute, to a safety incident.
To me, it seems like it comes down to data, right? And I think sometimes data is a general term, but if I'm a safety manager, I'm not as technologically advanced as, my kids. I feel like, sometimes software can get daunting, right? So in terms of the user experience, why there's been such a mass adoption of safety and inspection manager? And is that because of the user experience? Or does it have something to do with it?
I mean, when we talk about what are the biggest challenges with being able to perform inspections, one is, are they being performed at the frequency that you want them to be performed? And if they're performed, are the actions that are identified on the checklist being responded to like they need to be, right? And then three is record retention. After the inspections are performed, am I getting them into a record retention system so that I can demonstrate compliance should I need to do that? And so Safety Inspection Manager simplifies that whole process. I mean, you can generate a report like for yesterday's required inspections, which ones were delinquent. So you could have a daily jeopardy report, you have a weekly jeopardy report, you have a monthly jeopardy report. You can define the frequency that you would like. You can compare areas very easily, because now you've kind of have all the data that's kind of flowing into one location, so you can measure life cycle of equipment. Our housekeeping inspections being performed, what's being identified, whatever's identified, if it's deficient and needs to have maintenance address it, is maintenance aware that it needs to be addressed? Is it clearly communicated what the deficiency was? So even though a maintenance person shows up to go do a repair, maybe they go to a different part of the warehouse because it was, not clearly defined. So you got a picture that actually shows the deficiency that can make follow-up actions to be more effective. And then you close out the deficiency and you got a record of all of that life cycle that was completed. So it just simplifies that whole process, and it's simple to use. That's what I love about it.
So walk me through that. So I guess, one of the nice things about SIM that you had mentioned is it seems like, the collaboration piece, right? It's not just kind of this single use per user tool that a safety manager uses. I can plug in my workers. I can plug in my maintenance team if there's some sort of issue to go and repair or replace a piece of equipment. I can see repair notes and history. It seems like the collaboration safety inspection manager it's certainly a differentiator. And I know there's great, pieces of software out there, but I personally haven't seen anything that is as collaborative as SIM.
Yeah, I think it really does do a lot, to kind of put the ownership in the hands of the people doing the work, which is really important in building kind of that culture around collaboration. And I think that it is one of the fundamental building blocks that can allow that to happen.
I think, to your point, companies that are operating effective paper-based systems, they run a pretty tight ship, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also plenty of companies out there, especially with a lot of safety managers moving from company to company with turnover. It seems like somebody coming in with maybe a different system or doesn't have the ins and outs of the previous system can have difficulty making that transition, right? So maybe not for the companies that, have a safety manager has been around for 20 years, executes this system, it's locked tight, but maybe for the safety managers that don't necessarily have all their ducks in a row, right? And are dealing with this administrative burden, walk me through how SIM can help, those safety managers and those organizations. They're really trying to build that safety program.
Yeah, I agree totally with what you said. I think, companies can build a paper-based system that allows for their inspections to be executed on time, thoroughly, and define kind of routing methods for follow-up and addressing deficiencies noted, including retiring equipment. But it requires a constant vigilance, right? You almost have to be on top of it like on a daily basis. And oftentimes there's a lot of moving parts, which means there's a lot of folks that contribute to that type of program. And as if those subtle changes happen within it, it can actually put the administration at risk. And so maybe one area is not doing them as frequently as they're supposed to. Maybe they're not as thorough as they're supposed to. Maybe they're not routing the follow-ups to the right location, etc. So it requires constant vigilance, but it can be done. What I think Safety Inspection Manager does is it builds all of that vigilance into the digital world, right? So you create, the assets. You assign the inspections that you want to be completed for each of the assets. You assign who is the person, or what is the role of the person who performs that inspection, and then what is the frequency in which those inspections are performed. And then the system does that governance for you. And it's just a matter of you generating reports so that you have that oversight that the system is operating the way you want it to. I think that's the difference. So I think SIM is a tool to really take and relieve that administrative burden that it takes to have an excellent program, as just described.
Yeah, and I think, the point I keep going back to these safety managers that are managing multiple locations. God bless you if you're listening to this, by the way. But it's got to be. This is a full-time 60, 70-hour job, right? To get this system built. And then the other part is managing that system, right? Especially, and it becomes compounding once you have multiple locations, right? So from a safety inspection management, I guess, software like Safety Inspection Manager or SIM, I guess talk to me a little bit how it really helps those guys, the guys that really have big shoes to fill. They have multiple locations they're trying to manage, and they have, not just 10 employees, right? But, they're managing hundreds, if not thousands of assets.
To the point you raised, right? So if safety engineers, that is a very intense job. And to be frank, there's a lot of operations folks that can be a part of that administrative responsibilities as well. It does require a pretty intense effort in order to make sure that you keep up with all of those inspections, the follow-ups, the frequency, the documentation, the retention, all of those things. Being able to transition all of those assets into digital inventory and be able to do the inspections, from your smartphone, and then be able to, as the administrator of the system, be able to go to the portal and easily access the dashboard that we're looking at here on the screen, be able to know the status of my inspections and how many failed, how many passed, or how many were delinquent, how many were done on time, routing directly to the follow-up actions, being able to track the follow-up actions, from this system. It makes their life so much easier.